Hello and welcome to the Latino Business Journey podcast presented by the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Michael Puente. Our guest today is an accomplished author, businessman, and motivator. He's the chairman of the Barrio Foundation. Please welcome Dr. Robert J. Renteria.
Thank you.
Leo, Robert.
Gracias. Thank you.
Well, I don't know where to begin with you because you have done so much. You've done these TED Talks, you're doing books. Tell me, where do you want to start?
Well, I came to Chicago in 1990 after I honorably served our country for over 7 years as a non-commissioned officer. That's where I got my start. So I got a job in the commercial laundromat industry selling washers and dryers. And that's where it all began. So all over Chicagoland, if you see the spin cycles and bubble lands, esos lavanderias, that was me.
Wow. So where do you go from business person to motivator and author and all these? You're like a superhero.
Well, I was living in a bubble, right? I thought I had everything I ever wanted, right? I had a nice house on the pond, driving a nice car, a few bucks to the bank, flying first class. And then I realized one day that the two greatest days in your life are the day you're born and the day you realize why you're born. So I wanted to help some kids. So I wrote a book that later turned into a blueprint or a roadmap. So the first book was called From the Barrio to the Boardroom. Later, we crafted a curriculum that aligned with the Illinois State Learning Standards. So we donated curriculum all over the country at no cost to teach what's called social-emotional learning, critical thinking skills, and conflict resolution. After that, RFB&D got a hold of us, recording for the blind and dyslexic, and they launched a CD nationally. It impacts about 236,000 kids around the United States who are visually impaired, have reading disabilities. Then we released a book in Spanish, Mi Barrio Éxito, and then we have another curriculum that was crafted for the ministries to get kids in the Bible study leading to Christ, so our kids can see the promised land. So now we have a faith-based curriculum to teach the book From the Barrio to the Boardroom. So I spent a couple years in middle schools, high schools, colleges, higher education, youth prison, jails, social services, but I wasn't getting into the elementary school kids, and that's where the gang recruitment happens. So I had an idea to cut the umbilical cord to the gang recruitment, so we released a book called Mi Barrio, My Barrio, My Hood. And that book took off like a rocket. It was voted the best graphic novel in Latin America, Spain, the United States of America. So that book's third grade and up. So I wanted to get to the pre-K, K1 and 2, so release another book called Little Barrio. So I'm proud to say that over the last 17 plus years, I've invested about $400,000 in the future of our children's education. We're now in classrooms across America and over 25 countries around the world.
My God. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, because that's what you talk about. You have these TED Talks, and you talk about your time growing up in East LA, and it was tough.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up in the barrio, right? And we were in poverty and gangs, violence, drugs. My father was a heroin addict and alcoholic. He left our family when we were only 3 years old. And the only legacy he left us was a pile of bills and a bunch of empty bottles of booze in the trash can. But my mother, she worked 2-3 jobs to make sure that myself and my little sister did not become part of a system. And like a lot of kids, we didn't know we were poor. I mean, I make a joke that one time some guy broke in our house and robbed us. We robbed him. That's how poor we were. So fast forward, my mother remarries, the nightmare starts all over again, and she marries an abusive drunk. So he's beat up on my mother and beat up on me. So I found another dysfunctional family when I ran away. It was called gangs. Mm-hmm. And my life was spiraling out of control there. My father died on Skid Row when I was 17. He died homeless, an alcoholic, heroin addict. And then I made a drug deal that went bad. And I asked God, if you let me live, I'll sin no more. And I joined the military.
You had a gun pointed at you.
Right.
During that drug deal.
You're right. I took the drugs to this guy's house. It was cocaine. He took a knife, he tasted it, and then he reached in, which I thought was going to be a big wad of money. He pulled out a gun, he put it in my face and said, say goodnight. And he pulled the trigger twice, but it was a misfire by the grace of God.
And you felt that may have been the wake-up call you needed.
I promised God, if you let me live, I'll sin no more. And I never looked back.
And you went to the military.
Yeah, I went to the military. We all grew up in the barrio, right? And we don't leave our little circle. And my first assignment was overseas in Nuremberg, Germany. So I got a chance to travel the world. I became a non-commissioned officer. I landed up in the 3rd Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg as a paratrooper, an elite soldier. So and I learned a lot about leadership skills at those 7 years.
How did you find your way from East LA to then the Chicago area?
Well, what happened was, after I thought I was ready to be a man and go back and make a difference, my homeboys, my ex-homeboys, man, they were dealing heavy drugs. Some of them were doing time in a federal penitentiary, doing 25 to life. And I didn't want that. And they were coming after me, right? They wanted me to suck back, pull me back. And so I came to Chicago. Actually, a friend in Lyle, near Naperville, said I can come stay with him. So I came here with $200 in a duffel bag. That's how it started.
That's how it started. And then the move towards opening Bubble Land.
Well, Spin Cycles, Bubble Lands, and a lot of other laundromats. So I started here and as a sales guy. And, I thought that the other sales guys in the company were soft. They didn't want to work weekends or nights. So I would take their weekend duties and have them pay me. And then I got a chance to meet all the customers. And literally after 5 years, I got recruited and became vice president of a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange.
Where did your business knowledge come from?
Well, most drug dealers are business guys, right? So that was part of it. But I think that when I made it to corporate America is where I got my business skills from them, because they went through an IPO, went public, and I got a chance to manage a division nationally, internationally that went from 6 million to 80 million. So during those 6 years of climbing what I call the broken ladder of corporate America is where I got my business skills from, on somebody else's dime.
But you knew you had you were a writer, and you wanted to present those skills in a children's book.
Well, not initially, right? Because when I released the book in 2008, because after I left corporate, I started my own business, and my business was like in 3 years we were the #1 distribution company in the United States, and that's what I said earlier when I thought I had everything I ever wanted. And then I wrote a book to help some gang kids. I ran into a couple homeboys, and they said, "Hey, man, your car's fat." I said, "My car's fat?" Because it's cool. I was driving a new Benz at the time. And I thought, I'm going to write a book. We have children, teenagers, adults walking around lost in a culture of darkness. I'm going to do something about it. So I wrote the book thinking I was just going to have bragging rights and go back to work. And God had another plan for me.
And that plan was to continue and then motivational talk. Because you've seen the recruitment firsthand.
Yeah. I mean, now that I'm on this side of the fence, right, I've met with the gang leaders here in Chicago, both Latinos and both blacks. And, from what I understand, there's a moratorium on Barrio, right? They appreciate the fact that I'm trying to save our children because nobody wants to bury a kid. So a lot of these veteranos for the gangbangers, they don't want to bury their kids. So, you may or may not know, but our books are now in all the 28 Illinois state prisons. We're in several jails, youth detention centers. So it's not just schools. It's not just kids, right? We work with corporations like McDonald's, IBM, General Mills, General Motors, and Boeing. We work with social services, now the Boys and Girls Club, Boy Scouts of America, homeless shelters, battered women's shelters. So it's an anomaly, right? It has a lot of verticals.
What do you tell children who are living a tough upbringing? Maybe not a lot of money, maybe parents who are always working, can't spend too much time, and no money, where the gang life, selling drugs, is an attractive alternative to just being poor.
Well, a lot of the kids on the street, I tell them, listen, gang banging and violence is not a lifestyle, but a death style. And the ultimate weapon is not a loaded gun, but an educated mind. That's what I tell them.
Mm-hmm. And what's your message when you go into the prisons?
Well, I'll tell you a story, right? I was just out of prison the other day, and I sat down, and all the guys in front of their cells on the bottom and up on top. And I walked up and I sat down right in front of them. They had already read my book, which is part of the program. You have to read my book before I walk in the door. Mm-hmm. And I said, listen, I looked in your face. I said, I know you're pissed off, right? You think that your judge screwed you over, your attorney screwed you over, your homeboy screwed you over. When I leave here, I want you to look in the mirror because that's the guy that screwed you over.
What's their response to that?
They just kind of like concede and they realize that they made mistakes, right? So my whole program is about second chances, right? So the greater the struggle, the greater the victory. I tell them, your pain, my pain, our pain is not in vain.
Well, let's talk a little bit about business and just learning that side. How imperative is a group like the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to help businesses along the way to learn the path and open those doors?
I think good mentoring is very important, right? So that's important. Helping people understand where they can find money to help them through grants. Right. So the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for me, and I served on the board of directors in Aurora, Illinois, it's about a hand up, not a hand out. Right. So the chamber really gives you a hand up and helps you realize that you're not alone. That you can go through this journey by asking for help.
What's your advice to, like, say, aspiring entrepreneurs? They have an idea, they want to get it out there, they're not sure that if it's the right move.
Well, I would say to your point with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, right? Did you go to them for some guidance, right? Talk to somebody who's already built a lavanderia or a grocery store or even wrote a book. When I first started, I didn't have any help, right? Until finally I asked for help because, we as Latinos have a lot of pride. And sometimes pride gets in the way. But it's good to have pride. It makes you strong and moves you along. But you ask for help not because you're weak, because you have to remain strong. So I'd advise anybody, ask for help.
As you're moving up along in business, you've worked in the corporate world. What was one of the challenges that you faced that you felt like, I mean, I'm not sure if this is real or not, but if that maybe you felt maybe I made the wrong move, something like there was just a challenge that was tough to overcome, and how'd you overcome it?
Well, I would say that the racism that I went through during that time, like my first company, I worked for this guy, Jewish guy, and he'd say, "Hey man, let me borrow your switchblade." Or during the Christmas party, he'd lean over, he goes, "Hey, they're not going to serve tacos tonight." Or maybe we'd be at lunch at a pizza parlor. He goes, "If it doesn't work with me," he points to the busboy. He goes, "Maybe they'll hire you."
Nudging you.
So stuff like that. And then when I wanted to go to corporate America, he said, "You don't have the right stuff. You'll never make it there." So when I did make it there and I got finally into the boardroom, I realized that the crime really wasn't on the street. The crime was in the suits. So I learned about white collar crime, right? Because it was ruthless in corporate America. So that's why I left corporate and started my own business because I cared about people. In corporate America, the human element was far removed. They only cared about the numbers, and I cared about people. That's why what I do now works for me because I'm helping lift kids up. So that whole give back piece is important because too much is given, much is expected and obligated. So once you think you've made it, whatever that means, you got to go back and pull the other shorties up with you, right? The boys and the girls.
But how do you overcome that? Because so many of us would, in the face of that, would just shriek and just say it's just too much.
Well, back to the point, right? You try to find people that can help you. I asked for help, right? And like I said, part of the problem with not just Latinos, but people is that because we are embarrassed maybe to ask somebody, "Hey, can you show me the way?" So in overcoming those seemingly impossible obstacles was just hard work, persistence, dedication, and just hard work. There was no secret to the recipe, right? I just outworked everybody in sight, and I just stuck with it. I just kept pounding and pounding and pounding until I got where I needed to go.
You've done so much work with children too. You've done work with suicide prevention. Children nowadays have so many influences out there, and the main one is through their phone. So many negative influences. How do you get to them? I mean, it can be very difficult to communicate to a youngster.
Well, the way we're getting to kids around the world is we're partnering with other organizations. Like I just recently got endorsed by the World Boxing Council. The World Boxing Council mentors boys and girls ages 8 to 18 in 171 countries around the world. So I'm working with organizations that could help us put our books from the Barrio to the Boardroom, my graphic novel, Mi Barrio, and the activity coloring book, Little Barrio, into the hands of as many kids as possible. So we could exchange those books for all the guns, knives, drugs, needles, booze, and even the cigarettes.
What's their reaction to you? Because they just get so much information, and it's tough to pull them away from that.
Well, when I was talking at a school in Aurora the other day, I said, "Listen, that book that you read from the Barrio to the Boardroom, that's not really my story. I mean, it has my name on it, but it's not my story." And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's your story. I wrote it for you. It's our story. It's a story about people who come from tough places, but we work hard and we make a lot of sacrifices, and then we do whatever we have to do legally to come out clean on the other side." So it's just about story of hope and dreams y ganas. Si se puede. Yes, you can if you believe. So it's my story, is their story, it's your story, it's our story.
Tell me a little bit about your TED Talks, because they're amazing. They're just full of positive energy. How should you get involved with TED Talks?
Well, what happened is if you do a TEDx, right, you have to get interviewed. So I got a call, and I sat down before a panel, and I had to send them a 3-minute video that I had to create for myself. Then they have to vote if you're got the right stuff or the right message to be on a TEDx. So that's how I got involved. It was first started with an interview. And then that TED Talk gets shared all over the world, and other people get a chance to see it, and then you start playing catch eventually at some point. People start calling you instead of you having to pitch.
What's your like for your future? How where do you see yourself going? You've done so much already. It's hard to believe there's still a lot more to share.
Well, you may or may not know in 2016, we released a play called The Barrio Project. We worked with the choreographer for Gloria Stefan, and it was funded by After School Matters. And we took inner city kids, boys and girls, and they performed and produced in my play. And those kids, after a year, told me that their boardroom is now the theater. So through the theater, we were able to reach hundreds of thousands of kids throughout Illinois. Now, the next step is I'm in talks with movie producers to turn Barrio into a film. And now that I got endorsed by the World Boxing Council, now we have an audience worldwide. So that's going to probably be leveraged up so that we can go ahead and reach a lot of people worldwide. That's my goal. Take this thing worldwide.
You've done a lot. You've been through a lot of places, a lot of situations. What would you say is your biggest accomplishment?
That's a tough one. In 2013, I was the first Latino in the world to ever receive 2 national Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. awards for my work as a civil rights leader and a Latino voice in educational reform. So having those 2 Dr. Martin Luther King awards means a lot to me. I'm very proud of those specific awards. But there's several other things that I've done. I can go back in time when I made it to corporate America and the company went public. That first year, I got a check for $42,000, I believe it was. So I went home and I gave my mother a set of keys. And she said, "What does this mean?" I said, "This means you never have to drive the bus again, Mama." So I bought my mother a car. So that was a very important point in my life, that I was able to go back and show my mother that her son was not a loser. Her son was a winner.
What do you see? There's so many challenges just in the Chicago area alone. How do young Latino people overcome some of those challenges?
Well, it's going to go back to the same thing, right? We have to find people, mentors. We have to ask for help. You know, the whole thing with pride, it makes people strong, but it gets in the way, right? So my message: ask for help. There's a lot of good people out there, like the Chamber of Commerce as an example, right? Who has resources that can get you into a program, help you get scholarships, to give you a hand up. So, you know, for me, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, when I joined the chamber in 2007, was really good for me, because it really helped me understand more about business, right? About grants and resources that I didn't know before. So it goes back to just being, you know, strong and asking for help.
What is your top 3 advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Well, the first one is get involved with somebody who's already in that business, right? So that you can understand what you're getting into so you don't make mistakes. You know, the other part is be ready to work long hours, you know, and third is make sure you have a capital reserve, because you're not going to make money right out of the gate. It's going to take several months or even years before you can monetize it. So a lot of people get into businesses and they're short on cash, capital, and they fold because they can't sustain.
Dr. Renteria, in your business background, how has that aided you both as an author and distributing your children's books?
Well, what happened was when I made it to corporate America, as I mentioned, the company went through an IPO, went public. So I was handling their national and international distribution. So my job was to help scale the company. So in scaling, I learned the tricks of the trade, which helped me now with Barrio, with the Barrio books and my foundation. And so my scaling is coming through collaborations, through all these different partners that we have all over the United States and around the world now. So I'm taking it, I'm handing it to you, you take it and you hand it off to the next guy. So it's just about partnerships.
Partnerships and development. And what some of the advice that you received, the assistance through the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, can you talk a little bit about that, how valuable it's been?
Well, it gave me the fundamental basic building blocks that's needed. So you have to build your business on a solid foundation. So the chamber represents a solid foundation. Otherwise, you build your house on sand, it'll sink.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you've had so much from your childhood to overcome, then the military, then going into business. Now, you've had like 4 or 5 different lives. What's next for you?
Well, I'm going to continue to work on getting this movie funded, the Barrio movie, and scaling through just continuing to partner with different groups. I mean, I just spoke as an example at the Elgin Township the other day. So the township supervisor brought Barrio into Elgin, so I got a chance to meet all the stakeholders. So I want to follow that model, and my next stop will be the Dundee Township. Is just to continue to partner with cities and municipalities. I'm meeting with Sheriff Mendrick out of DuPage County. this week coming up, but they're going to take my books and distribute them through all his population. So to my point, it's just continuing to partner.
Who do you want to play in your movie? Who do you want to play you?
I haven't thought that far yet.
We'll find somebody.
Yeah, we'll find someone.
Well, Dr. Robert J. Renteria is the chairman of the Barrio Foundation. He's an accomplished author, businessman, and motivator. I want to thank you for being a guest here today on the Latino Business Journey podcast presented by the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
And thank you for listening and watching. I'm Michael Puente. Have a nice day.